So, Joel Embiid has won the 2023 MVP after the past 2 years finishing runner-up. And while he wasn't my first pick, of course, he's highly deserving and had a great season, leading the NBA in scoring and leading Philly to a top 3 seed in the East. And when it comes to the MVP, specifically this year, I'm glad this race is over with and it's finally out of the way. As winning this award, while impressive, I think for me and a lot of fans, this award has no bearing on how good or great a player is. And actually I think these playoffs have proved just that, as in these playoffs Nikola Jokic has been far better and healthier than Joel Embiid, despite not winning MVP. And before we deep dive into this, I want to be very clear, Embiid winning this award, once again, is fantastic and a great achievement. All I'm saying is that the NBA playoffs are a different ball game, and for Jokic versus Embiid, there's a big gap in postseason play and postseason resume. And with that finally out of the way, looking at Jokic, in the first round his Denver team played the Minnesota Timberwolves with Rudy Gobert, Karl Towns, Anthony Edwards, and a top 10 defense. I mean, Minnesota wasn't an awful team, they weren't the greatest, but Jokic in this series averaged 26, 12, and 9 on 49% from the field and 50% from 3. And having Gobert and Towns, you expect defensively they do a better job on Jokic. But unfortunately for them, it didn't matter who was guarding him or what scheme they concocted, as Jokic got his points in the mid-range, the post, even behind the arc when they dared him to shoot. It was borderline embarrassing and even abusive what Jokic did to Rudy Gobert, a former Defensive Player of the Year. And when it comes to offensive versatility, I think Jokic at this point is in the Steph Curry type tier as the best offensive players in the game. As looking at 3-point shooting, this part of Jokic's game is highly undervalued, as career-wise, he shoots 40.4% from behind the arc in the playoffs, and this year is just above 46%. Compared to Joel Embiid, who in this year's playoffs is shooting a pitiful 12.5% and is a career 28.9% shooter from behind the line. Nikola Jokic at this point is a one-of-one talent and a unicorn for the center position, as he can score in the paint, the post, the mid-range, he's a great free throw shooter, and from 3 is highly reliable. Compared to Embiid, who's a very good offensive player, but not all-time great, like Nikola Jokic. And the argument I have made numerous times is that comparing Jokic and Embiid, the defensive gap isn't nearly as big as the playmaking gap, as Embiid obviously is a great defender and an above-average defender at that. But Jokic, while not being a great defender, is an all-time great passer, and I'd argue a top 10 passer and best passing big of all time. And watching these playoffs so far, seeing Jokic versus double teams, triple teams, even zones, pick your poison. He's going to pick you apart, make the right play, find the open man, the shooter, the lob, the dump off pass. He's going to make the right basketball play and the best play for his team. I'm not saying Embiid isn't capable of that, but in comparison to Jokic, their passing and playmaking, and really offensive IQ of finding open players is on different levels. And looking at Jokic this year, he is second in the NBA in playoff assists, first in passes made, and second in points created off assists. As a defensive team in the playoffs, when you can't effectively double team their best player, that creates all types of mismatches, cross matches, and just fits in general for your team. Not being able to double team the Joker is a big reason I think Denver will make the NBA Finals. As looking at their shooters, in large part due to Jokic, these guys are thriving in the playoffs, as KCP, Aaron Gordon, and Braun are all above 40% from behind the arc, and both MPJ and Murray are above 30% respectively. And look, those players are great shooters, but with Jokic being around them, their open looks, it's 10 times easier and it's a dream to play with. Compared to Embiid, but once again, he's a good passing big, but not a great passing big. As even versus Brooklyn, an average defensive team with pretty good rim protection, Embiid struggled versus double teams, as late in the fourth quarters of numerous games, he he took bad shots in crucial spots, was pushed out of the paint by double teams, was operating on the perimeter, and his playmaking was severely limited because of that factor. I'll give Embiid credit for one thing: when it comes to double teams in the post, he is fairly good at finding players open out of those doubles. But where it gets dicey is on the perimeter, especially in the pick and roll. As unlike Jokic, Embiid's three ball isn't falling as not a threat for defensive teams. And looking at his overall numbers versus Brooklyn, he was alright, averaging 20 points, 11 boards, 4 assists on 46-12 and 96 splits. Not bad by any means, but for a superstar player, a quote-unquote MVP, it wasn't his best, as both Maxey and Tobias Harris in this series outscored Joel Embiid. And I gotta address the elephant in the room: when it comes to Embiid in the playoffs, each and every year he's either sick, banged up, hurt, or not playing. Every single year with this guy, it's something else. And look, I want to see Embiid healthy and playing. He's a great player, and I don't wish injury upon him. But looking at his track record, it's very Anthony Davis, Kawhi Leonard-esque, where he's missing games here and there for different reasons. And compared to Jokic, who's basically always healthy, that matters in these player debates. And one thing I do want to touch on is the quote-unquote MVP and being the most valuable, as I think these playoffs once again have proved Jokic is the better and more valuable player, as Philly minus Embiid is 2-0 without him and beat Boston in Game 1 in the Boston Garden. And like you saw, James Harden exploded for 45 points and was doing virtually everything. Hypothetically speaking, do you think Denver minus Jokic could go into Boston and beat that team? Maybe you do, but I think most of you guys realize that's virtually impossible for this Nuggets team, as Jokic for them, at least offensively, is far more valuable than Embiid. And looking at Philly, everyone ignores they have James Harden, the most underrated guard in the NBA. And I'm not a big Harden fan, but he makes Embiid's life so much easier, as Jokic in Denver doesn't have an all-time great point guard setting him up for 2-foot dunks and wide open jump shots. As for the Nuggets, he's playing both the Harden and Embiid role, being his team's best scorer, best passer, as well as rebounder. And in Game 2 versus the Suns, you saw Jokic and his value to his team, as Jamal Murray, after a great Game 1, was pitiful in Game 2, going 3 of 15. Even with that terrible performance, Jokic in Game 2 had 39 points, 16 boards, 5 assists on 17 of 30 shooting. And looking past that one singular game, Jokic in the playoffs compared to Embiid averages more points, rebounds, assists, steals, are better shooting from 3, as well as the field. And compared to the entire NBA, he's 8th in scoring, 4th in assists, and 3rd in boards. Out of the entire playoffs, the only player top 10 in all of those categories. And compared to the entire league once again, he leads the NBA in win shares average, and box plus minus. This may be a shock to some people, but Jokic in the playoffs is definitively better than Embiid this year and in years prior. As comparing the past 4 years, from 2020 till now, Jokic once again averages more points, rebounds, assists, better shooting percentage, 3 percentage, with less turnovers. That is the objective facts speaking for themselves. As when it comes to the playoffs, we judge these guys off merit, how they play, and how much their teams succeed. And yes, Jokic hasn't had that much success, but compared to Embiid, it's definitely more impressive, as Joel to this point has yet to make it past the second round for his entire career. I guess the point of this video is pretty simple. Yes, Joel Embiid is the MVP, and that was fantastic. But looking at him versus the Joker, this year, last year, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, Jokic always has been the better player, the more valuable player, as well as the more versatile player. So, as always, thank you guys for watching, hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you next time.